Part 1. The Road Back to Asheville. The small, winding road into Asheville, North Carolina was flanked by thick forest and the golden hue of late October. The trees shimmered in gradients of amber, crimson, and deep rust, and the breeze smelled of damp leaves and firewood. Evelyn Hart hadn't seen her childhood town in 12 years, not since she left for the Navy, not since the arguments with her father turned from sharp words to silence. She drove an old silver Subaru, windows down, music low. The cassette player still worked, and a Fleetwood Mac tape played softly, landslide, weaving into the air. The last few years had taught Evelyn a kind of quiet, the kind that fills you up when words run out. But there was still one place where the silence hurt: home. Her destination wasn't a house, not yet, but a small roadside coffee shop just before the main strip of town. Maple and Pine, it read in faded gold paint, the kind of place where locals sipped black coffee with honey and retired teachers ran book clubs in the back room. Inside, she found the same mismatched furniture, the same worn counter. The woman behind it, Carmen Alvarez, blinked in surprise before her eyes lit up. "Evie Hart," she said, stepping around the counter and wrapping Evelyn in a firm hug. "Thought you went and forgot about us." Evelyn smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "Not a chance. I was just waiting for the right time." Carmen handed her a mug without asking. "One honey latte." Like muscle memory. They sat by the window. The town outside hadn't changed much, but Evelyn had. Years in intelligence had taught her how to read silence, how to interpret a pause in conversation like it was Morse code. But now, here, she had to relearn how to speak plainly. "So, what brings you back?" Carmen asked, not unkindly. Evelyn stared at her coffee, then said, "Dad's health is failing. Mom passed during deployment. I missed the funeral. I didn't want to miss the rest." Carmen placed her hand gently over Evelyn's. "It's never too late. Not here." Later that evening, Evelyn pulled into the driveway of the old family home. The porch light was still crooked, and the steps still creaked. Her father, Thomas Hart, opened the door slowly, his cane tapping once before he spoke. "You didn't call," he said. "You wouldn't have answered," she replied. They stood in silence for a breath. Then he stepped aside. "Come in. The guest room's still yours." That night, Evelyn sat on the back porch wrapped in her old flannel, the Appalachian hills rolling under the moonlight. She didn't know what she'd find here: healing, maybe? A place to put her past down, finally. The air smelled like damp pine and memories. In the distance, a train whistle echoed. Somewhere, a dog barked. And for the first time in years, Evelyn let herself feel the weight of being home, heavy, strange, but safe. Part 2. The Ripples in Silence. Mornings in Asheville arrived slowly, threading through fogged window panes and casting pale light on the worn wooden walls. Evelyn woke before the sun, a habit she hadn't shaken from her years in uniform. She poured herself a cup of black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and stepped out onto the back porch. Her father, Thomas, was already there. He sat in his old wooden rocker, a wool blanket draped across his knees, a dog-eared National Geographic in his lap. He didn't speak when she came out, just gave her a quiet nod, the kind of greeting that said, "I see you," even without words. "Coffee's still as bitter as it was when I was a kid," Evelyn murmured, staring out at the maple trees losing their leaves in the backyard. "So are you," Thomas replied, eyes not leaving the page. The silence between them stretched long, but this time, it wasn't strained. It was the kind of silence that held history, not the kind you tell, but the kind you carry. After breakfast, cornbread with honey butter, just like her mother used to make on Sunday mornings, Evelyn drove into town. Carmen had arranged for her to help with a community project, restoring the old town library, where Evelyn had spent many childhood hours hiding among stories. That's where she met Jonas Miller, a high school teacher with messy hair, gentle eyes, and a sense of humor too dry for the humidity. "Hey, soldier," he greeted, extending a hand. Carmen says you've got a knack for strategic operations. Time to channel that into defeating dust and termites. Evelyn chuckled. The sound surprised her. Operation Revive Childhood, understood. Over the next several days, Evelyn worked alongside Jonas and a ragtag crew of volunteers, retired teachers, college students, and a few sulking teens forced into community service by their parents. She relearned patience, unscrewing old hinges, dusting off ancient shelves, and most of all, listening to stories she used to think were small. One afternoon, Jonas pulled a note from behind a copy of Charlotte's Web. A child's handwriting scrawled across a folded index card. Miss Evelyn, thank you for visiting last week. You made me want to dream more. Evelyn stared at the words. Who wrote that? She asked. Kid brother of one of my students, Jonas said. He heard you used to serve in Syria. Told me he wants to grow up to protect people, but without a gun. Evelyn's throat tightened. Not out of sadness. Out of something gentler, something softer breaking loose. A part of her she thought had fossilized. That evening, she returned home to find Thomas stirring vegetable soup on the stove, the same soup he used to make when they were too tired to argue. He set aside a bowl without a word. Extra pepper? Was all he said. And sitting across from him under the yellow kitchen light, spooning warm soup in quiet peace, Evelyn realized what was healing first. The feeling of being seen, of being needed. No fanfare, no parades, just someone waiting for you to come home. Part 3. The distance between sisters. The coffee shop on Lexington Avenue was as Evelyn remembered, wooden beams, mismatched mugs, and the scent of cinnamon that clung to every cushion. But the tension in her stomach was unfamiliar. Her sister, Samantha, was already there when Evelyn arrived. Sitting by the window, stirring a latte she hadn't touched. Evelyn stood there for a moment before walking over. She hadn't seen Samantha in nearly 6 years. Their last words were shouted over a phone line that crackled more than the trust between them. Hey, Evelyn said. Samantha looked up. Her eyes didn't widen. No surprise, no warmth. Just a small nod, almost imperceptible. Hey, Evelyn sat. Neither of them reached across the table. The silence was jagged at first. I heard you were back, Samantha finally said, picking at a corner of a napkin. Carmen told you? No, Samantha replied. Dad did. Evelyn blinked. That surprised her. I didn't know you two were talking. We weren't. Until last month. A beat passed. He had a fall, Samantha added. Slipped on the back porch. I had to take him to urgent care. Evelyn sat straighter. Why didn't anyone tell me? You were gone, Samantha said, sharp but not angry. Just matter of fact. Gone in more ways than one. That landed hard, but Evelyn didn't flinch. I know. The table between them held years of unspoken things. Regret, resentment, longing. I missed your wedding, Evelyn said, voice low. You weren't invited, Samantha replied, eyes softening, just a little. I didn't know how to reach you. That stung. I wasn't lost, Evelyn murmured. No, you were just unreachable. Another pause. Samantha looked out the window at the passing cars. Mom would have known what to say. Evelyn's chest ached. Their mother had passed 2 years ago from lung cancer, quick, quiet, like everything else in their family. Evelyn hadn't come home for the funeral. Not because she didn't care, but because she didn't know how to mourn with people she thought she'd lost long before. I read her last letter, Samantha said. The one she left for you. You should have come. I couldn't. Evelyn stared down at her coffee. I didn't want to be the storm that showed up at the funeral. Samantha's eyes glistened. She didn't see you that way. Evelyn reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a worn envelope. The paper had softened from being held too often. She slid it across the table. I read it every year on her birthday, she said. Samantha looked down at the envelope, then back up. She loved you, you know. I know, Evelyn whispered. Their hands didn't touch. Not yet. But they weren't clenched either. Samantha finally said, "I'm not sure I'm ready to forget everything." "I'm not asking you to," Evelyn replied. "Just, maybe we could remember different parts of it. The ones that didn't hurt." A long silence passed between them, but this time it was full of breath. Samantha nodded slowly. "Come over for dinner next week. We'll see what happens." Evelyn smiled for the first time in hours. "I'll bring cornbread. Only if you use Mom's recipe." Their laughter was small, but it was real. Outside, the Asheville sky was losing its gray. A hint of sun pressed through. Part 4. A Place for Questions. The next morning, Evelyn woke to the hum of small-town life outside her window, birds arguing in the oak trees, someone mowing their lawn too early, the smell of fresh bread drifting from the bakery 2 blocks away. It was so different from D.C., where mornings began with headlines and sirens. She took her coffee out to the front porch of Carmen's house. The wood creaked under her step, familiar and forgiving. Carmen joined her a few minutes later, carrying a steaming mug and a plate with 2 slices of buttered toast. "Figured you hadn't eaten." "You know me too well," Evelyn said, smiling. Carmen sat beside her, their knees brushing. "Sam told me you met up." Evelyn nodded. "It wasn't a disaster. That's progress." They sat in companionable silence, sipping their coffee, watching a boy ride his bike up and down the quiet street, looping in tight circles like he was drawing invisible spirals. "She invited me for dinner next week," Evelyn said quietly. Carmen turned to her, her expression soft. "That's huge." Evelyn shrugged, but the way her fingers curled around the mug betrayed her hope. "I'm not sure we know how to be sisters anymore. You'll learn. Maybe not all at once. Maybe not evenly. But love's a language we can relearn." Just then, a little voice cut through their thoughts. "Excuse me," a girl said. They both looked down to see a child, 6, maybe 7, standing by the porch steps, holding a stack of colorful paper in one hand and a stubby purple crayon in the other. "I'm doing a project," she declared. Evelyn blinked. "A project? For school?" "I'm asking neighbors questions." Carmen grinned. "You've come to the right place." The girl climbed up one step, then stopped. "Can I ask you both something?" "Sure," Carmen said. The girl looked down at her paper and read aloud. "What do grown-ups miss most from when they were little?" Evelyn paused. No one had asked her a question like that in a long time. Carmen replied first, tree houses, and falling asleep during thunderstorms. Evelyn looked out over the street. The bike kid had stopped to pet a cat. "I miss believing that people come back," she finally said. "No matter how far they go." The girl scribbled furiously with her crayon. "That's a good one." She handed them each a sticker, a star and a dinosaur, then ran off down the street toward another porch. "She's in Ms. Riley's class," Carmen explained. "They do these mini community interviews every year." Evelyn smiled, touching the dinosaur sticker. "She's bold. Kind of like you used to be." The sun warmed the porch now. Birds had calmed, and the sound of the mower had faded. Later that day, Evelyn walked into town on her own. She visited the local bookstore, the same one where she and Samantha used to spend hours as kids, curled up on mismatched beanbags. The owner still remembered her, gave her a small notebook and said, "You used to fill these with made-up stories. Thought you might still want to." Evelyn smiled and bought a new pen on impulse. At sunset, she sat on the swings at the town park, watching families play, teens laugh by the benches, and old couples stroll by with knowing eyes. A golden retriever barked at falling leaves. For the first time in years, Evelyn didn't feel like a ghost in her own life. That night, she wrote in the notebook, a letter to her mother, a poem, a memory. None of it perfect, but all of it true. And at the bottom of the last page, she wrote one sentence she hadn't dared put into words until now. "Maybe I didn't lose everything." Part 5. The Things We Keep. The invitation had come in a text message. From Dad, "If you're still in town, your mother's garden would be glad to see you again." No signature. No emojis. Just enough space for Evelyn to slip through. 2 days later, she stood in front of the old blue house she'd once called home. The paint had faded in places. A wind chime swayed gently near the porch. The mailbox still had her last name engraved, Harper, though someone had painted over it in white, the letters faint beneath. She stood for a long time, unsure if this was a mistake. Her feet stayed where they were. Her heart moved forward without permission. The door opened slowly. Her father stepped out, older now, hair fully silver, eyes as tired as they were kind. "I was making tea," he said simply, as if years hadn't stretched between them. She followed him inside. Everything was smaller than she remembered. The hallway she used to race down felt narrow. The living room, once enormous in her mind, now just a space holding a couch too floral and a carpet too familiar. A framed photo of her high school graduation still hung crooked on the wall. The kitchen smelled like peppermint and wood polish. The kettle was already hissing. Her father poured them both tea in mismatched mugs. Hers was the one with a chip in the handle, the one she always used. "I didn't think you'd answer," he admitted, stirring in sugar. "I didn't think you'd ask." They sat at the table, quiet except for the ticking clock and the sound of two people searching for the right words. Then he said, "I read your article. The one about cross-border stabilization strategies." She raised an eyebrow. "You read that?" "I didn't understand half of it, but I was proud." She set her cup down gently. "You never said that before." "I didn't know how." They didn't look at each other, not at first. But it was enough. After tea, he led her out back. The garden was still intact. Lavender in one corner, tomatoes in wire cages, sunflowers tall and defiant. "Your mother started it again last spring," he said. "Said it was time." Evelyn knelt to touch the soil. It was warm, living. "She'd be glad you came. She'd be surprised." He handed her a small envelope, yellowed at the edges. "I found this a few weeks ago. In her recipe box. I think she wrote it for you, but never got the courage to send it." Evelyn opened it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakable. "My Evelyn. I don't know how to reach you anymore, not through calls or silence. But I hope one day you'll come home and find this buried among flour and sugar and cinnamon. I didn't understand your world. I was afraid of what it might take from you. But I never stopped loving the girl who used to sing to herself while peeling apples. If you read this, it means you're alive. And that's enough for me. Mom." Evelyn read the note twice, then folded it slowly and tucked it into her jacket pocket. Her chest ached, not sharply, but like a room long sealed, finally being aired. That evening, her father walked her to the front porch. As she stepped down, he said, "We still have the photo albums. I couldn't throw them away. I'd like to see them sometime. You'd be welcome." She walked back through the neighborhood alone, the envelope pressed to her side. The streetlights flickered on one by one. A teenager skateboard by, laughing into the wind. Somewhere, someone was barbecuing. She passed the church where she used to sing in the youth choir, the corner store where she'd bought her first notebook. Life hadn't waited for her, but it hadn't locked the door either. And somehow, that was enough. That night, in the quiet room at Carmen's, Evelyn unfolded the letter again. This time, she didn't cry. She just smiled. And wrote back. Part 6. When the Wind Shifts. Weeks passed in a golden blur. Evelyn stayed in Santa Fe longer than planned. Her return flight sat unused in her inbox. She had slipped into a rhythm, mornings spent walking down adobe-lined streets, afternoons writing by Carmen's window with chamomile tea at her side, evenings filled with silence that no longer ached. Each Thursday, she met her father for a short walk through the neighborhood. They didn't say much, but each time, their steps fell more naturally into sync. She even visited the high school once, after an invitation from the new social studies teacher. She gave a quiet guest talk on conflict resolution, using metaphors about bridges and boundaries. One student asked, "Do you ever miss the action?" Evelyn paused. "I miss the purpose," she said. but I'm learning purpose isn't always loud. That night, as she walked back through the amber light of the setting sun, Carmen was waiting on the porch. "There's a letter for you," she said, holding up a cream envelope. "From Washington." Evelyn took it with steady hands, but her heart picked up pace. Inside was an offer. Department of Civic Affairs, Director of Peace Innovation Task Force. A domestic post. No combat zone. A new program that focused on healing communities fractured by years of division. A chance to build, not just repair. The position was based in Charleston, South Carolina. She sat with it under the apricot tree, the same one she had looked up at when she first arrived, brittle with weariness. Now its leaves danced above her like laughter. The next morning, she called her father. "I got an offer. Something new. Somewhere new. Will you take it?" he asked. She watched a hummingbird hover near a cluster of lavender. "I think so. Then we'll come visit. Maybe this fall." Evelyn blinked at the idea. "I'd like that," she said. 2 weeks later, she packed her things. Carmen helped her fold sweaters into boxes and wrapped a ceramic mug in brown paper. "I'll miss the stillness you bring," Carmen said. "But Charleston has ocean breezes. I think your story wants to live near the sea now." They hugged on the porch. When Evelyn finally drove away, she looked once in the rearview mirror. Carmen waved from under the apricot tree, a faint blur of blue and gold. Charleston welcomed her with the smell of salt and magnolia. Her apartment was small, near the marsh, the windows let in soft morning light. On weekends, she visited the Sunday farmers market, where locals sold homemade peach jam and sea glass jewelry. She began to learn names again. People, places, herself. Each month, a new letter arrived from her father. Sometimes typed, sometimes handwritten. One envelope contained an old photo, Evelyn, age 10, with dirt on her nose and a sunflower in her fist. She placed it on the bookshelf, next to the letter from her mother. One quiet evening, she stood barefoot on her balcony, the ocean wind brushing her face. The city lights shimmered like lanterns. From somewhere down the block, someone played a saxophone. She pressed a hand to her chest, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. For years, she had carried her past like armor. Now, it felt like a story written on her skin, not erased, just gently faded into something softer. Evelyn Harper had lived many lives. Soldier, strategist, stranger, daughter. But now, she was simply here, breathing, whole. And when the wind shifted, she turned her face to it, ready for whatever came next. Side story: the letter that never sent. It was a late December afternoon in Charleston, the kind where winter slipped quietly through the city in a soft, salt-sweet breeze. Evelyn sat tucked into a corner of a small bookstore on Queen Street, holding a warm cup of cocoa, letting the mellow jazz humming from the ceiling speakers settle into her bones. Outside, newly strung Christmas lights blinked softly in the dusky windowpane, casting a golden hue over the face of a woman hesitating by the entrance. Amelia Kent. Evelyn recognized her almost immediately, once a comrade, later a rival during that brutal strategy summit in Brussels where hard words had fractured an already delicate friendship. Evelyn set her cup down. "Amelia?" Amelia turned. Her eyes flickered with surprise, then relief. "I guess I couldn't hide forever." "Sit," Evelyn said, pulling out the chair across from her. For a few moments, neither spoke. Only the rustle of pages and the vinyl crackle of old jazz filled the space between them. "I suppose I should start," Amelia finally said. She reached into her coat and pulled out a worn envelope. "I wrote this 3 years ago, but I never sent it." Evelyn took it. The paper was wrinkled and faded. She opened the envelope and read silently. "Evelyn, I know you may never read this, but if I stay silent forever, I'm no longer myself. I was jealous of your talent, of how people listened when you spoke, and I let that envy become betrayal. That anonymous letter. I wrote it, not to destroy you, but because I wanted to see you stumble. And I've regretted it every single day. If there's ever a way to make amends, I'm willing to take it. Amelia. Evelyn folded the letter. She didn't feel anger. Not anymore. You came here for forgiveness? Amelia shook her head. No. I came to tell the truth. Forgiveness. That's not something I expect. Evelyn glanced out the window. A misty drizzle had begun, blurring the lights into soft halos. I kept this letter, Evelyn said slowly, in a locked drawer for years. Not to accuse you, but to remind myself that words, even invisible ones, can shatter entire lives. She looked at Amelia then, not with contempt, but with a kind of calm. But I've also learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means not letting it own me anymore. Amelia nodded, her eyes misting. You're the same as ever. Quiet, but deep. Evelyn smiled faintly. These days, I grow petunias on my balcony and teach young officers how not to repeat their elders' mistakes. They sat in silence for a moment longer. Then Amelia stood, hesitant. I'm giving a lecture at the military college nearby, she said. If you're free. Evelyn tilted her head. Send me the schedule. Amelia smiled, not entirely with relief, but with the first light after a long storm. As the door closed behind her, Evelyn looked down at the old letter, then slowly tore it into small pieces. The winter breeze slipping through the window lifted the fragments and carried them away, as gently as breath on a December evening.